Eleni and Kasia, I'm doing this especially for you today because I forgot to turn the video recorder on during our short lecture today. I'm going to give you this short lecture, and then we watched a video on Quezon, which you may want to watch at your convenience. It was very good, but here's the information that you missed today. We stated that after the Tet Offensive, that CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite was actually in Vietnam during a week working, covering the war during the Tet Offensive. And when he returned from Vietnam after Tet, he was quoted as saying, quote, "What the hell is going on? I thought we were winning the war." Well, to take it even further, on February 27th, 1968, on his nightly CBS Evening News show, he stated this on national television where probably 50 million people heard it. He said, quote, "To this reporter, it seems now more than certain that the bloody experience in Vietnam is to end in a stalemate, and that the only rational way out will be to negotiate." Well, President Johnson was in the Oval Office watching this with his aides, and he turned to his aides and he said, after listening to Walter Cronkite, "If I've lost Walter, then it's over. I've lost Mr. Average Citizen." And from this point on, the Vietnam War will go on a downward spiral for President Johnson and will lead to his demise. Well, 2 days after Walter Cronkite made his reflection on Vietnam on the nightly news, Secretary of State Robert McNamara, who had served both President Kennedy and President Johnson, resigned from office, and he was replaced by Clark Clifford. The Tet Offensive obviously caused more and more resentment back to the United States, more and more protests, and I'm going to give you 4 examples of specific protests that happened after the Tet Offensive of significance, and you'll get a chance to see these on a video I will show later in the year. The first occurred on October 21st, 1967 in Washington, D.C., where a crowd of over 100,000 protesters tried to close down the Pentagon. Well, the Pentagon reacted by putting MP, military police soldiers, in front of the Pentagon on all sides to make sure that the protesters were not successful in their efforts. And it really started to cause some tension because some of the more radical demonstrators began to clash with soldiers that were protecting the Pentagon, who were fully armed. Seeing possible violence and maybe even death occur, one conservative protester began chanting, "We are not against the soldiers, we are against the war. We are not against the soldiers, we're against the war." This kind of united people to a more peaceful protest, which helped maybe the saving of lives. And one of the most significant photographs of that protest happened when one peaceful protester, to curb the tense moment, placed a carnation in the barrel of one of the MP soldiers' gun and smiled and nodded to let him know they weren't against the soldiers, they were against the war. He did that as a sign of peace as they continued their chant. The second example happened on April 25th, 1968 at Columbia University in New York City. The university was planning on building a student gymnasium on a playground in a black neighborhood on land they owned that was being used by local black youth. These young protesters did not like the action, so they took the following actions at Columbia University on April 25th, 1968. First of all, these student protesters stormed and took over the office of President Grayson Kirk. They then seized and secured 5 other buildings on campus, and they even held 3 college officials hostage for 24 hours. These actions forced the suspension of classes at Columbia University, and both local police and military had to come in and restore order. The third example were protests by young adults in Washington, D.C. at colleges and universities, outside federal buildings in Washington, D.C., and even in front of the White House, where you could hear this bitter chant in protest directly to President Johnson. The first was, "Hell no, we won't go. Hell no, we won't go." Basically stating that they would not be going to Vietnam even if they were called to duty. The second chant, which was more personal to Lyndon Johnson outside the White House, was, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? The fourth example of protest was when you registered for the Selective Service in those days as an American male over the age of 18, you got a draft card that would be used to draft you into military service. And all across the country, including Washington, D.C., young males were burning their draft cards in protest of the war. Those are the things we talked about today in the lecture. We will lecture next Tuesday because you do not have my class Monday because of the new schedule, and we'll talk about the fall of LBJ and how the Vietnam War ruined him. Hopefully you had a good trip. If you were sick today, I hope you're feeling better. Kezia, I know that Delaney, you're back east. I hope you had a good college visit. Here are your notes. Please make sure you're prepared for next Tuesday when you come to class. Thank you.